So let me introduce Michael. He's director of the South Asia Institute at the Wilson Center. He's a leading specialist on Afghanistan, India, and Pakistan and their relations with the United States. He's the editor or co-editor of at least 11 books. He's written for marquee publications, New York Times, Foreign Policy, Foreign Affairs. He has edited volumes on Pakistan's energy crisis, urbanization, and India's contemporary security challenges. So, Michael, my question to you is essentially, in the during Trump's first term, we saw him talking tough on terrorism emanating from Pakistan, which is an important concern for India. And of course, now in the aftermath of the withdrawal of American troops, it's been now 4 years, right? Uh, how do you look at Trump 2.0 policies in South Asia? What impact will it have on South Asia, and what could be possible ramifications for India? Over to you. You have 10 to 12 minutes so that we can have some discussion. Over to you,
Thank
Mike.
you. Yep. Thanks, Manisha. Great to be here, and I appreciate the compliment. I often feel old, so I'm glad that I look young. But I will respond to your question with 3 points, three brief interventions. The first one is that the incoming president will likely retain the Indo-Pacific strategy as the core policy guiding U.S. policy in Asia, including South Asia. And of course, as we all know, this was Trump's policy to start with. He came out with the Indo-Pacific strategy during his first term. It might be adjusted a bit, it might be rebranded a bit, but I suspect that we will see continuity with the Biden administration on this policy. And I think that this would bode well for India. The U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy is, I would argue, aligned with India's own strategic interests in South Asia, particularly when it comes to the idea of working with partners to counter China and its growing presence and influence in the region. I suspect that the Trump administration will likely pick up where the Biden administration left off in terms of how the Indo-Pacific strategy is deployed. I think that one big focus will be on trying to offer investment options, particularly infrastructure investment options that are transparent and equitable and more attractive to countries than what they've gotten from China. The focus will be on trying to give countries better alternatives to what China is doing. I would argue that the U.S. Has not been terribly successful with this plan, but I think that we have seen some modest progress over the last few years, and I think that this general plan of action will continue with the second Trump administration. I think that a big tool of the Indo-Pacific strategy will continue to be the DFC, the U.S., the International Development Finance Corporation. It has to be reauthorized in Congress. I suspect it will be, but assuming DFC is reauthorized, I'm quite confident that the Trump administration will retain it. And again, the DFC is something that sponsors infrastructure investments across the Indo-Pacific. Now, the Trump administration might change the focus of it a bit. There has been a very heavy focus in terms of DFC investments in South Asia on clean energy infrastructure, climate change mitigation technologies. That might change a bit, but I'm quite confident that the DFC will continue to be wielded as a very critical tool by the administration to pursue its Indo-Pacific strategy. My second point, in response to your question about what we could expect for Trump's policy and South Asian implications for India, is that Trump's country-specific approaches in South Asia, not India here, but other countries in the region, should on the most part have positive implications for India's interests and for India on the whole. Start with Pakistan. A few of us have already mentioned Pakistan briefly. It's hard to imagine much engagement with Pakistan from the Trump administration. I would argue that the Biden administration didn't really have much engagement with Pakistan. It, of course, did not change the move during the first Trump administration to suspend most security aid to Pakistan. And as we all know, you had several rounds of sanctions slapped on Pakistan for its ballistic missiles program, just during the last few weeks. And I think that we're going to see continuity here with the Trump administration. I don't think that this Trump administration will have much interest in the newer areas of focus that emerged on modest levels in the Biden years. The Green Alliance framework, for example, was a big part of the U.S. Relationship with Pakistan. It's something that the U.S. Embassy in Islamabad pushed a lot. Clean energy cooperation, I don't really see those being retained as priorities for either U.S. relations with Pakistan or U.S. relations with countries on the whole. I would also argue that many have spoken about how many of the people that Trump has picked to be a part of his administration constitute some of the strongest proponents of partnership with India in all of Washington. And I would argue that these same people happen to be, in many cases, some of the harshest critics of Pakistan in Washington. You think about someone like Mike Waltz or Marco Rubio and so on. There is one possible wild card with Pakistan here. If Pakistan is able to successfully exploit Trump's concerns about the Islamic State terror group and Islamic State Khorasan and its presence in Afghanistan, and tries to offer certain things to the U.S., like offers to share intelligence about ISK movements in Afghanistan. Trump and his administration, I think, will worry a lot about the ISK threat. I mean, this is something that's been a big concern for the Biden administration, especially as ISK has demonstrated the ability to project a threat well beyond Afghanistan. And there even have been a few plots, ISK plots, foiled in Europe and even in the United States. So this will be a concern for the Trump administration, and ISK does have its main bases in Afghanistan. I'll get into Afghanistan in a moment, but I would not overstate this possibility of the idea of new counterterrorism cooperation with Pakistan. It's just hard to imagine the incoming president or anyone in his administration being willing to give up something in return to the Pakistanis, in return for Pakistani offers of intelligence sharing, counterterrorism assistance, or whatever the case may be. I just don't think there's going to be a lot of trust at all for Pakistan from this administration. We know the story of U.S.-Pakistan relations, and we know how the relationship has changed, I would argue devolved, since the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. Let's go to Bangladesh briefly. The Biden administration has reconfigured the relationship with Bangladesh during its last year in office in ways that I don't think the incoming president will support. Since the ouster of Sheikh Hasina, the U.S. government focus has been on professing support for Bangladesh's efforts to stabilize the country, bring back democracy. The U.S. has pledged support with development aid, technical assistance for reforms, and so on. And I think that for the incoming president, this might sound a bit like nation building, and I don't think that he would be inclined to support that type of plan of action. I don't think that he would be terribly inclined to embrace Dr. Yunus because of his politics. The two men, of course, Trump and Yunus, have very different politics. In the past, Dr. Yunus has criticized Trump quite harshly. I'm not sure if the incoming president will remember that, but that could be an issue as well. I think that Trump and his administration will view the relationship with Bangladesh through commercial and strategic lenses. His administration will want to pursue trade, which grew during the first Trump administration, U.S.-Bangladesh trade. But Bangladesh's worsened economic state over the last few years may cut into that hope of maintaining healthy trade relations with Bangladesh. And also, I think that the administration will want to push Bangladesh to try to rely less on China, part of the broader Indo-Pacific strategy. Whether successful or not, these likely U.S. goals vis-a-vis Bangladesh, I don't think appear to have a lot of risk of upsetting India. I just don't think you're going to see as close of a relationship between Yunus's Bangladesh, or however long he stays in leading the government, and Trump compared to Yunus's Bangladesh and Biden. Let's go to Afghanistan very briefly. The administration is not going to want to rock the boat. Some of the likely top officials in the administration, including Mike Waltz, who we know he'll be there from day one, these are sharp critics of the Taliban. They won't want to engage with the Taliban, but on the whole, the administration like the Biden administration, will accept the Taliban, even if it does not extend formal recognition, and I doubt it will. It will also likely view the Taliban's efforts to counter ISK as a good thing, something that indirectly benefits US interests. If we assume that the Trump administration will take a don't rock the boat type policy with Afghanistan, I think that that should be helpful for India as New Delhi very cautiously looks to expand its outreach with the Taliban, as it's been doing in recent weeks. My third point, and I'll be brief and conclude, I think that the most deleterious potential implications for India coming out of Trump's South Asia policy will likely be some of his policies regarding India. I think that, we've heard this already. Trump will be good for US-India partnership, generally speaking. He'll help advance it. But there will be some minefields to navigate, then the risk of tariffs, pressure on India to buy less Russian oil, the possibility of Trump backing airstrikes on Iran, the two ongoing investigations, the murder for hire plot, the Adani indictment. Trump, I think, will want those investigations to continue to be pursued. The possibility that Trump might try to reach an understanding with China. None of these challenges would cause grievous harm to US-India relations. It's a deep and multifaceted relationship that's, I think, foolproof from these shocks or these potential shocks. But what I'm saying, and I conclude here, is that the challenges that we could see in US-India relations in Trump 2.0, I think that would be more serious than any challenges that could potentially arise for India stemming from Trump's policies in India's neighborhood more broadly. So with that, I'll conclude, and back to you, Manish.
Thank you, Michael, for very succinct and very pointed analysis. There are different countries in South Asia, especially when we talk about India, Bangladesh, that will be worth exploring in detail.